Hey guys, Tony Reed here. Now we all know spring is right around the corner and you're going to need plenty of podcasts on your playlist for those long hours in the field. The one podcast that I'm going to recommend is Farm for Profit. Tanner, Dave, and Corey do a phenomenal job of having a wide range of guests on their show. It might be anyone from a university professor to an estate planner to a marketing analyst. They even have Machinery Pete on there from time to time. Then once a week they do a Farm for Fun episode where they sit around and crack a few cold ones and kind of get off the beaten path a little bit. And those guests may come from Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, or even TikTok. It's a great podcast. You got to go check it out. They're on all the major players, Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, all of them. You can even go to Google and type in farm4profit.com and read all about them. They call themselves the mullet of podcasts. Go check it out. You won't regret it. That's farm4profit. Welcome back to the Straightforward Farming Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Reed, alongside Mr. Nick McCormick. We want to thank everybody who's tuned in over the last week. We've got some excellent feedback on our podcast. So for two guys that really don't know what we're doing, I guess people are liking it so far. So I guess we'll keep plugging away at it and doing what we're doing, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully we're entertaining somebody. You know?
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know. This week I was kind of wanting to brush on a few topics. Obviously, with you being a diesel mechanic your whole life, you've seen everything under the sun come through your shop. I mean, whether it's a catastrophic failure, something that you've tore apart on a tractor that was 40 years old, and you're like, holy cow, this thing still looks brand new inside. What's some of the things that nowadays when it comes through the shop, like really gets your attention? It's like, is it design flaws or things that are designed well? I mean, what's...
Well, I think, in the older tractors and whatnot, the lion's share of those engineers, test engineers, whatever, were probably from an ag background. They'd probably spent some time on models previous. And as we move forward, as talent gets harder and harder to grab, as industries grow, so many of these factories and test facilities are in larger cities. So rural kids aren't necessarily drawn to that. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to get a farm kid to move to the city when they really don't want to do that, but there's not room for them to farm, but they really don't want to live in the city. So you're getting more and more people that are perfectly qualified engineers and they're good at what they do, but you can tell the actual practical application maybe isn't there because they didn't grow up with it. So they designed part A, it's in the way of part B, but nobody really cares because, right. Well, the guy that's doing part C will have to fix that because he's going to cover up both of them, whereas before, of course, there was less things on equipment, but they tried to keep it simple, tried to plan ahead a little bit so that this wasn't in the way for that. Now you look under the hood of some of this stuff, it might take you 2 hours to even be able to see the valve cover.
Yeah.
And I realize, as emission stuff comes on and new technology, et cetera, that's going to fill up that space. However, it's very hard, I think, to find qualified people that have a super good ag background that want to do this. I myself, would rather have a C student that grew up on rotor combines and knows if you're cracking corn, you slow the rotor down, as opposed to an A student who doesn't know how to start the combine.
Right.
Because you're never going to get that background instilled in them. I can't teach you how to farm if you show up at my farm at 50 years old, probably. Right. But if you show up at 5, I can probably teach you by the time you're 10, and you can probably do it without me.
Yeah.
And you're seeing a lot of that trickle over in the industries, whether it's on your pickup truck or your farm tractor, it's definitely showing up now.
Yeah, nothing infuriates me any more than when you go to take a part off a machine that by all rights should be a 5-minute job, and now it's a 2-hour job because there's so much other shit in the way that you got to take off to get to the one little piece, and it's like, whoever designed this is an absolute moron. I mean, that just infuriates me when that happens.
I'm with you there. I mean, not knocking the engineers by any means, but, and there is a lot of stuff going on underneath the hoods of these new machines, but I'll take the axial flow combine, for instance. Okay, so since 1977, we're going to make this awesome new machine. We're going to make it as simple as possible. We're getting rid of the belts, chains, anything we can to make it as simple as possible. Now you look at these newer machines, it's like, could we put any more crap underneath the side shields of this thing?
Yeah.
And that's not all just because those kids aren't rural, but they also don't have to take it apart, put it back together more than likely.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of dynamics that play into that. The harder you make it, the more it goes to the dealer, which benefits the dealer, kind of, sort of, but it also hurts your product, kind of, sort of, long term. So,
yeah, that's, to me, I've always thought somebody that would make an excellent engineer are the guys that are usually covered in grease from head to toe because they know the machine like the back of their hand. It's like, well, these three goofy parts here could have been made into one part that will do the same result in the end, but instead we got belts and pulleys and chains and all this stuff. I've met different engineers at farm shows and stuff, and I could tell by looking at them, their hands hadn't been dirty very often in their life. And I'm not picking on engineers. I'm not saying that made him a bad engineer.
No.
But that told me that the guy had probably never ran one of these. They got dishpan hands when you look at them. It's like, now come on, man. You ain't smashed the piss out of your finger with a wrench or not.
They might get carpal tunnel from pointing and clicking, but
yeah.
And they're getting, not to knock engineers in general, but it's just like sometimes they need to take a step back and look, and like in 20 years when that machine is, still being, somebody still wants to use it, but now it's going to cost me X number of dollars to do a pretty simple job to it. Well, then it makes it unaffordable to keep it, and not everybody can have the new stuff. Yeah. I realize they're not in the business of selling used equipment, but in a way they are, right. And that more holds their value, right, if it's better long term. Yeah,
some of these. It really does make you wonder what was going through their head on some of this stuff. Especially combines are the worst. Tractors. A lot of that emissions stuff. There's no way around it. That's government mandated, and yeah. Each company's maybe got their own variants of a DEF system or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's a giant pile of stuff under the hood that
yes.
I have no clue what it does. It's just there. And it causes many problems and sensors and all the shit that goes along with it. But to me, combines are by far the worst. There's so many moving parts, pulleys, belts, chains, everything on them. And, it is an engineering marvel in and of itself to build combines like they do today,
yes,
to what the capacity that they'll handle and the speed that they'll run. But man, some of that stuff, it really does make you scratch your head.
Well, like I said, and not to tout the axle flow, but that was basically the combine that combines are based off until here pretty recently. Now we're starting to see them drift a little bit further away. But for the last 20, 30 years, everything kind of trended to look like that, trended to operate like that, tended to be set up like that, and it's very simple. I realize yields are going up, but do we really need a combine with a feed accelerator, 2 rotors? We're putting every threshing system that's ever been invented a cylinder. We're throwing it all in one machine.
Right. Now you got a re-thresher on a deer, where it comes in in your return, and
it's like that's all well, good and great till it gets 2,000 hours on it, and half that stuff's wore out. And well, now your combine needs $50,000 worth of repair, even though you spent $45,000 on it last year.
Yeah.
And now we're going to trade it. But at some point in time, that stuff starts to stack up. And what do you do with all these machines that really aren't that old, but can't really be used for anything because it's not economically feasible to put them back in the field? Right. And the other thing that, and this is brand wide for the most part, but it's like, okay, tractor's $300K or whatever it is. For $300,000, if you're in the automotive industry, the fit and finish on that's pretty nice. You hop in a $50,000 pickup, fit and finish is pretty nice. You buy a $300,000 tractor, it sat outside 6 days last year, the paint's faded. Mm-hmm. It didn't fade off your truck, but it's about to fall off your tractor. Your wheels are black now, even though they're supposed to be silver or yellow or whatever it is. The paint popped off and stuff like that, which really isn't an engineering deal, but it's just, I expect a little bit more for the cost of some of that.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess to me, too, I hate the fact anymore, and this kind of drifting away from engineers, is on like tractors especially, now it's a one-size-fits-all. Like on a new R-Series Deere, 90% of the buttons in there I don't use. I don't know who the hell's using them. I don't even know what you call that. The implement management system where you click one button and it does all that. Are you really that lazy that you can't still just take your finger and flick the toggle switch? You got to hit just one button now instead of 2.
My biggest pet peeve in the world on tractor industries is draft control. Do you know how much money has been thrown at draft control over the years? Do you know a single person? If you're that person, please private message us. I'd like to know who in the world has ever used draft control. Right. I don't need draft control. What I need in that situation is 50 more horse.
Yeah.
I've never needed draft control in my life. Think about all your little loader tractors and sitting there. There's $20,000 worth of electronic crap tied to that draft control. That tractor's getting a loader put on it and a bale spear. I've never needed draft control on a bale spear in my life. And that's what all those 100 horsepower or less tractors are getting used for. They don't need draft control. Nobody's out plowing with that.
Right.
You know, you want to give me options, you give me, the Premier cab or the slightly cheaper cab or this, that, give me one without draft control. You don't need it, not going to use it. I just want hydraulic up and hydraulic down. A 560 had the best 3-point there was, or 2-point there was, because it was power up, power down. Mm-hmm. I'd like to have power down, but no, instead I got draft control. So on that rare time I hit a hard spot, my plow goes over it instead of plowing through it. Never needed that.
Which, once again, it's like half this stuff's tailored off of Europe, Mm-hmm. I don't know of anybody around here who still moldboard plows. Now, I know there's always rules of the exception. There's somebody out there that does. But the vast majority of the people buying these tractors are not moldboard plowing with them.
No.
And I don't know what you would be using the 3-point for, other than, a corn planter, obviously, but you're not using draft control on a planter. So,
no, Exactly. I'm like, that's a wasted feature that costs how many thousands of dollars that nobody's ever used in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Some of that just infuriates me. The other thing is, and this isn't really on the engineering topic, but it's like from an equipment side, when you start discontinuing parts, and I realize you can't supply everything forever, but some of these companies, I know they're looking at, well, we haven't sold any of these yet. Well, no, you haven't sold any of those. The tractor's 2 years old.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have sold any of those yet. Well, we're going to start nipping these part numbers off. Well, next thing, that devalues your brand going forward. It's like, well, I'd really like to buy that tractor, but I know if the hydraulic pump goes out of it, I can't get one anymore. So I guess I'm not going to trade for that. Well, that ends up hurting the dealer, hurting the brand, hurting the company in general. And I don't think there's some bean counter somewhere that's doing the math on that. It's like, well, we only sold one of those. Well, once again, you shouldn't have sold any yet. They shouldn't be bad yet. So we're nipping that out of the parts system. Next thing you know, you can't buy anything for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And some of this too, where is the electronics and the computers going to stop? So like the combine we just traded for, it's a John Deere S760. And now you're even running the air conditioner through the computer. It's like, is that really necessary?
Yeah. Exactly. I don't understand. I'm sure they've got a logical reason in their mind why that is. I'd just soon turn the buttons and be fine. You take a mid-2000s Ford truck, the windows quit going down, beat the dash because it runs through the dash.
Yeah.
Well, it's tied into your gauge package. The windows can just be a switch that goes to power. I don't really need them tied into my tach and my speedometer. You get going so fast, do the windows automatically roll down? I haven't got to the speed of light yet. Maybe that does that. I don't know. But, there's some silliness there that's like, if you sit back and think of it, no, that's not a good idea. And it's frustrating from a, technician standpoint. It's frustrating from a farmer standpoint. Some of those things, it's like, wonder what they were thinking that day. Wait, they probably weren't.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and that's even going to get worse now on the computers and electronics. Now we're into prescription tillage.
Yeah.
And I can't knock that because I've never tried it. But, how much more are we going to fine tune this deal?
Well, at some point in time, we're trying to build the brain out of it, right? So we quote unquote can't find qualified labor. So we're just going to set it up so anybody can hop in it and sit there and, stop it if it's going to run into something, but otherwise let it go and it does everything for you. And that's well, good and great. But when I was a kid, if you saw a mud hole, you just didn't go through it. You went around it, you lifted it up, skimmed across the top, maybe tried to hide it for the planter guy.
Right.
But you didn't have to have prescription tillage. And yet they grew corn all those years.
Yeah. I don't know. And I will admit, these corn yields today, I think it is hybrids. I'll give that maybe most of it. But it's also, like I've said too, the equipment nowadays is much better too. Go take an old John Deere 7000 planter and try to no-till beans with it, or take a new John Deere 1795 and try to no-till beans. It's light years difference between the two. So that's got to help improve yields as well.
It has. There's a lot of factors in there that have definitely helped improve yields. Like I said, there's a lot of things that we take for granted, from the equipment side, from the grain quality side, from all facets of farm life, really, that have benefited us. Some a lot, some a little, but that's all played into the average yield being higher.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and now, our combine that we traded for does not have this on there, but the camera's now in the tailings and everywhere that's automatically adjusting the combine on the go, and man, that just scares me to death what that stuff's going to be 15 years from now.
How are you going to keep that working? They can't keep the windows going up and down in your pickup truck consistently. but yet this camera is going to adjust this combine for 15 years. No, it's going to adjust it for about 15 minutes. Anybody I've talked to that has one of those systems says it's great, works good, it's fine. I can out tune it if I'm willing to get out of the seat of the combine and actually look and see what I got. And that's on us. Farmers is, as a whole, we've got to the point, well, if we can just get close, that's probably good enough.
Yeah. And I think that's where some of this technology has covered up the laziness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When we were kids, you physically had to get off and adjust depth or whatever to get the job done right. Now you do it from the cab. Yeah. And so you're not out kicking around behind the machine as much as you used to be.
Yeah. When we were kids, we had cylinder stops. And oh crap, I don't have enough. I don't have the same ones for both sides. I either got to go too deep or too shallow. What do I do here? I don't have enough for both sides. Then it went to cranks. Then single point depth control. Holy cow, I don't have to change it in one spot. That's revolutionary.
Yeah.
Why didn't we think of that sooner? Now we're controlling it from the cab with a computer. Oh, wait, the computer quit. Now we can't pull our fuel call anymore. Now we just wish we had cylinder stops.
Yeah, right. I tell you what, though, on engineering, in my personal opinion, one of the most epic engineering failures of all time, my personal opinion, had to be the 1086 International. Whoever, any of the, I don't care if it's 10, 15, 14, whatever. That entire series of tractors. And they sold a shit pot full of them. I mean, they really did
They did because they had a ton of diehard red guys at that time. And keep in mind, I'm a red guy. Not a fan of the 86 series. I just don't know how you can walk up to that thing as a finished product and be like, bam, we've got it. That's what we're going to sell.
Yeah.
The second you go to get into it and you hit yourself in the head with the door because it opens the wrong direction, then you're like, those gear shifts are in the wrong side. And they're in my way to get in the cab. That seems like a good idea. I've said for years, the engineer that designed that, and I hope he's listening if he's still alive, I would have loved to work on his car because when he come back out after lunch, it would have shifted on the left side between the door and the seat. That's where it has shifted, and it would have blocked the entire door. If they would have just put park to the back instead of the front, would have made more sense. So you didn't have to hump the lever to get in. And hop out of one of those in a pair of Carhartts with a plier loop, catch yourself on the lever, and end up upside down. That's a good day.
I'll bet it is. Yeah.
I mean...
Which to me, them tractors weren't even comfortable to drive. I didn't like the way they sat. I didn't like the way the controls were laid out. I didn't like anything about them.
Well, so my theory on that is the test guy that did those, his legs bent backwards like a dog. He was 5 foot tall and his arms hung to his feet. It's the only way you can reach all the stuff in one of those cabs. And like I said, I'm a red guy, but it's like, at what point do you say, our cab is this deep, our steering wheel's here. Hell, nobody cares if the seat goes back far enough. We'll just let it rub into the cab interior and tear the interior off the first day. I'm like, can we not put a couple extra inches in there? And, the sales mantra back then was this thing rides like a horse. Have you ever ridden a horse? They do not ride that well.
Exactly.
I don't want to sit in the middle. That's not a viable option.
Yeah.
I never could figure out how we ended up so short-sighted on that. I mean, and not to pick on, the old times or whatever, because hindsight's 20/20. So you can always look back and say, who's the guy at Deere that thought the Vision Guard cab was a great idea? Let's put a post in your way. Let's put a muffler in your way. Let's put the exhaust pipe in your way. We're going to offset all three. So 30% of your field of vision is completely blocked. Your cab's round.
The PTO lever was as bad as the 1086 shifter you're getting in,
Yeah, I just, of course, like I said, looking back, it's always easy to pick on stuff, right? I mean, you can always do that. But there's some of those things, it's like, that just was a poor idea from front to back, and we kept it for years.
Yeah, they did. I mean, that stayed all the way up till when the 8400s come out, like in
1993, I believe.
Yeah, so
I could be off a few years there, but it was around 93.
Yeah, so
I remember driving one at the Farm Progress Show, and it was in Dalton City. I think it's the year it came out.
Yeah, you're right. It was. Dalton City was 1991.
Okay. Yep. So it might have been 91 then.
So that was not quite 20 years. When did the first Vision Guard cabs come out? I mean, it had to have been mid
44, 30, so that'd have been
74, 5.
Somewhere in through there. Yeah. It's like you can't have bigger than size 10 feet. You can't get through the bottom of the door.
Mm-mm. And the whole thing was in a circle to me. It opened goofy. It just...
I just don't understand. But you can take even simpler things like that. Picking on the Alice Chalmers guys here for a minute. We're going to pull the kill out to run and push in to start. So the kill's sitting there beating against your knee all day.
That's how an AC is?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
They're theft proof because nobody ever thinks to pull the kill out to start it. That's not intuitive, right?
I've never drove anything past a WD on an AC.
Not knocking you AC guys, but you're not missing anything.
Well, The WD in and of itself was a pile of shit. You talk about setting clear off to one side. I mean, that was a bad design in the 30s and 40s.
Well, on that note, who thought, we've got this combine here. Sure, you'd like to set in the middle of the head, but we'll just put the cab clear off here to the one side. So you set over this snout. We got a stairway to heaven to get you in, and we'll just put the engine up there where you can keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was revolutionary to put that behind you and move the cab to the center.
Yeah.
Really? Nobody thought about putting the cab in the center till then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and that's what's funny on deer, the old 55 combines and whatnot, the engine was in the back and you pretty much sat in the middle of it. And then it's like they took a giant leap backwards and put the motor, which I've always wondered, there's a guy up around, I don't know if he's around Assumption or wherever, he's got an 8820 John Deere combine with a 35-foot MacDon Draper on it. I've always wondered how awkward that's got to look sitting in the cab, because, I mean, you got to be looking 3 miles off to the right.
You have to have a monocle so you could see over there to the other side. It's just simple things like that. Like, say, looking back, it's like, what were they thinking? But by the same token, times being what the times were, they were selling them.
Yeah, and everybody was that,
everybody
the old,
was that way.
The 715 internationals and all that.
And you only had so much time to get something done and so much money to do it. In my mind, that's part of what makes the Axial Flow Combine so revolutionary. I think from the history I've read on that, that actually started off as a kind of a side project for two engineers who didn't have anything to do. And they did years of research on that before International even knew they were doing it, basically. I mean, they were doing it on International's time. But, the advancement through that, I don't know would have ever gotten done had any company actually known that they were doing it or tried to physically do it on purpose, because there's so much testing there that went on that I don't even know that you could logically look back and say, yeah, this is the direction we want to go, if anybody would have actually followed through with it.
Yeah.
Because they failed a lot of stuff early on, until they got the concept down. Because it was so new compared to how everything had been done.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
For the whole time of combines.
Yep. What is the argument? And I hear this 1,000 times a year from the Deere guys. Well, Deere had the first rotor but never released it. What was the story on that? I have no idea what they're talking about when they mention that.
I don't know on that. I don't recall them ever having the first rotor. International had been working on it since the 50s. It seemed like somewhere in through there, maybe Deere dabbled in it for like 2 days.
I'm sure they bought it from somebody or
stole
it.
I think they dabbled it. Of course, there's so much cross-pollination of engineers leaving one company, going to another. Well, they know what the other one's doing now.
Yeah.
So they play with it. And I think it was one of those things. It's like, well, this is going to be 20 years of development. We're not spending the money on that. We'll wait till somebody else comes out with it, refine it, market it better, which is exactly what they ended up doing.
Sure.
And they're great at that.
Yep.
They've made a career out of taking somebody else's idea, dolling it up, and selling it as their own.
Yep. So like a New Holland combine, because to my knowledge, they've always been rotary. So was there never a New Holland combine prior to a twin rotor? I'm not aware of it. Not saying there wasn't.
Honestly, I can't tell you. There might have been. Part of the reason they got to release theirs first, to my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, so don't take this as gospel, but one of their test combines was sitting at a truck stop somewhere or sitting in a farmer's shed somewhere where they were testing it, and some IH engineers found out about it, went over and took a look at it, and of course took their International Harvester tools and left them and ended up getting caught, and that was the government stipulation or whatever, is they got to release theirs first. IH had to delay their release.
Is that right?
And let New Holland have an advanced release on that, to my understanding. I could be wrong on that, but I'm sure I've read that somewhere.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that New Holland was the first to release.
Yeah, they were. I think they released theirs in '76. Yeah, and IHs wouldn't have come out till '77, late '77, early '78. Huh. So I think that was why. Yeah. I could be wrong on that. Of course, there was no Facebook back then,
Right.
You probably didn't have a Polaroid camera back then.
Yeah.
So it's not like you were just going to snap a couple of quick pictures. They're probably in there with tape measures and this, that, and there. Even though it was a waste of their time, New Holland really wasn't going to be that big a deal on that. They should have let it go, but it happened.
Are these companies still as secretive today as what they were on, like I've always read, stories where, these combines are completely shielded up, locking shields where you can't see underneath when they're testing them.
I'm sure they are. Of course, in today's world, it's so hard to do. Somebody's going to see it on the interstate. Somebody's going to take a video.
Yeah, and everybody's got a camera in their pocket.
Everybody's got a camera in their pocket. And so it's so hard to do now. I think a lot of what they do is make it look like the model that's current production. Mm-hmm. And then we'll test it. It's different underneath, but we make it look like that, and then we restyle it at the end.
Yeah.
And release something new.
Makes sense.
To try to hide it.
I'd be curious to know on like Deere's twin rotor how long that's actually been in the field, in some version or another. I mean, obviously under the wraps,
Probably a lot longer than you think.
Yeah.
But, that stuff would be tough to cover in today's world.
Yeah. And I guess, as long as you're willing to scale it down, I mean, because I don't know physically how much bigger an X9 is than, a big combine. If you can scale all that down and still put it inside of an S790, the same internal components as an X9 to demo it, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably can at some level. Like I said, it would be tough to cover. It's not like they've got thousands and thousands of test acres fenced in somewhere. They're traveling for that. They're going here, they're going there, different conditions, this, that, and the other. They're not testing all that stuff next to Moline.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would assume, some of that probably even takes place overseas, whether it's Australia or even Brazil or places where you can probably maybe get it under wraps a little tighter when you're in, remote locations.
Yeah, it's hard to get too far off the beaten path here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know. Some of these engineers, though, it does make you scratch your head, but I guess it makes the world go around. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it all come through your shop.
I mean, it can be simple things like, how long did it take for front wheel assist to catch on? We tried to do it hydraulically.
Yeah.
That didn't work day one.
Yeah.
But Deere made it that way for a long time.
Yeah.
What was their first actual MFWD tractor? It was, what was that?
4960, wasn't it?
Maybe a 55 series was mechanical, I think.
Or it could have been, I guess 45, 55.
But prior to that, it's like,
Yep.
just little things like that. It's like, really? You think that's going to work? I mean, nobody was buying it. That's why they're so rare now and bring such good money. They weren't buying it because it wasn't good.
Yeah, that's right.
Which translates now to it's rare, so it's worth big money. It doesn't matter who the manufacturer is. Stuff that wasn't good when it was new is worth a lot of money now because there wasn't very many of them.
I would not go to the field now without front wheel assist or just flat out four wheel drive track. I mean, it just
absolutely, yeah.
No comparison compared to what it was.
And it's funny to see how some trends are still trends because they were marketed well.
Yeah.
They were, the 2+2, I will argue, was revolutionary in its time. The implementation may have not been great, but the concept was awesome. Basically a front wheel assist that could carry saddle tanks, which everybody was trying to carry back then, that turned really short, right?
Yep.
And that, you can do things with the 2+2 you still can't do with tractors today. And you for sure couldn't do with tractors for 10, 15 years after those. They didn't turn short enough. It took a long time for front wheel assist to turn short.
Sure.
But since it's international and they were going under and Case hated those tractors, they killed them off. Had that situation been different, had Deere had that, had IH stayed in business, had Case not hated it so much and they'd come out with the 70 series 2+2s, we might still be seeing a variation of that in production today.
Yeah.
Who knows, but part of it, since it was based on the 86 series, it goes by the wayside.
Yeah. That's one tractor I have never drove as a 2+2. Never been in the cab of one. I've just, there was a fair amount of them around here when we were kids.
Yeah. You either love them or you hate them.
Yeah.
But the concept was phenomenal.
Yeah.
They actually had a 2+2 Magnum for a while.
Really?
Never went to production, but finally got restored here a while back.
Have the power shift transmission, the whole ball.
It was just a Magnum that bent in the middle, had the accordion in the middle, and it bent in the middle.
No kidding.
Yeah, I think that it steered with the front axle some and then would bend in the middle for extra tight turning, kind of like your row crop special.
Yeah. Yep.
9230 or 9130, 9330, whatever.
I'll be darned. I think it'd be so cool if you had a way to get into some of these companies. It's hard to say some of the stuff that Deere's built over the years that never went into production. That just got completely scrapped and thrown away before anybody even seen it. And there had to be some neat stuff. May not have been practical to guys like you or I, but it would have been neat.
It might not have been, but was it not practical because manufacturing hadn't caught up to a great way to produce it? Like forward flow cooling on a 50 Series International, great idea. Not the best implementation. Plastics weren't really popular yet. This, that, and the other. So there's like 400 stamped steel panels that go into that, and a bunch of blind holes, and it kind of ends up being a cluster. But the concept's great. Pulls the heat away from the cab. Anything sucks into the top of the screen, you can see it. Instead of your front grill getting plugged up, you can see it from the cab, right? It's a great idea, but we put a hole through the radiator and put the fan out front. There's a lot of little things looking back now that you could make it good with that didn't necessarily jive at the time. But yeah, there's a ton of ideas. I'd always heard, and I'm pretty certain this is fact, that the original rotor design for International had the auger front on front of it. But an opposing team within the company had elephant ears on theirs, and that engineer outranked the other one, so they ended up going with elephant ears.
Is
Well, the auger front was revolutionary. But they had it 20, 30 years prior to that, but it never made it to production. I don't know if that story is 100% fact, but I'm pretty sure that's fact.
Yeah, I'll bet there is some stuff that would absolutely blow your mind
Oh,
on
for sure.
what's been.
Remember the bi-rotor combine that Deere ended up buying? I mean, do we need it? Do we not? Probably not. It was, but that's a super neat concept.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe it's too expensive to produce, but is it easier to do one rotor or you know, that's a bi-rotor, or is it easier to do two, like everything's going to now? You know, I mean, do we need two rotors? We've been getting by with one rotor for a long time, except for the New Holland guys. But do we really need the other? I mean,
yeah, I've wondered that too on Deere. I mean, is there an argument there that you can somehow get better capacity or anything with two because you're not turning this big ass rotor, cramming it all in one area? I don't know what the
some
argument.
of it is size constraints, etc. But you got to think on some level that some of it's just, if we come out with something new, somebody's going to trade for it.
Yeah.
You know, you were still getting from New York to California in your Model T, if you want to take the time, or you can get there in a brand new Ford Power Stroke. Some point in time, we just change stuff for the sake of changing it.
Yeah.
So that people buy it because it's new. If we keep selling S790s, people get tired of that. Well, I already got one. I don't need a new one.
Yeah.
But now we come out with the X9. Well, it's new. I got to have it. So let's trade up for it.
Yeah.
You know, some of that. So there's a lot of factors that play into that, and I'm sure that probably plays more of a factor than we give it credit for.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how the X9 performs this year because, I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be out on, you know, a somewhat, I don't know if I'd call it large scale, but, you know, the custom harvesters out west, people like that's going to have them, you know, there's going to be several people with them now versus the 6 or 8 that they had last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm curious to see the feedback because, you know, the Deere's been pretty tight-lipped on everything about that, and I'm just curious now as to, you know, we're going to get the real story now and see if it lives up to what they're saying. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure it'll be fine. You know, even when things have been produced that weren't fine, they kind of get grazed over, and it's not quite the catastrophic failure that it used to be, even though in today's world you'd think it'd be worse because of social media, this, that, and the other. You know, if you find out, you can tell 150,000 people in the next 35 seconds.
Yeah.
Whereas in olden times, well, you find out, you can tell 5 people if they happen to be getting coffee when you go to town.
Yeah.
So word travels fast now, but I'm sure it'll work out fine. I mean, the testing process on that stuff now is vetted probably a lot better. You know, they got so many simulations in plants and this, that, and the other to work through a lot of those issues before it ever sees crop.
Yeah. That is one thing that drives me nuts on Deere's is the PIPs, the product improvement program, whatever they call that. But it's like, would you guys just slow down and maybe hold on to this thing 1 year longer and get the kinks worked out? I mean, every time you buy something, got a PIP on it, got to do this, we got a 9230 tractor. I bet it's had 15 PIPs on it, anywhere from extra shields being put on it to changing this and changing that. It's like, good night. I mean,
and I think a lot of that goes back to the fact, though, that we're so pressed to release a new model, right? Because if we keep selling the same thing we're selling now, nobody's going to buy it because they already got one. So we release stuff prematurely when if we just hold our breath, you know, let's face it, those combines aren't getting tested to 4,000 hours.
no, there ain't no way.
They don't have that kind of time. You know, the window's not big enough. They don't have the ability to do that. So, you know, some of the stuff that you and I see wear out in the field never wore out in the test bed, never wore out in the test machines because they didn't run them long enough.
Yeah.
And part of that is the farmer demanding, hey, sell me something new. Sell me something new. You know, we're not talking Coca-Cola here. They tried something new. We don't want that. We want the same old Coke. But when it comes to farm machinery, we're as guilty as the industry probably because we want different stuff. We want to buy the next cool thing. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
So they're forcing it on us, probably a little ahead of when they should.
Yep. I don't know. It's sure looking like around here that tractors are becoming popular. You know, when we were kids, none around here. You know, and that was clear back. You know, back then, Cat was about your only tractor at the time. But gosh, I can name a dozen or more within 10, 15 miles of here now, and I'm wondering if that's going to be the next wave in this area. You know, it's kind of growed, and I wonder if you're going to see more and more of that as time goes on.
As some of that, I think, becomes a little more affordable, and there's more on the second tier market, you know, the used market or whatever, that's going to be the trend. And I think the lion's share of that drive probably around here is just transport down the road.
Yeah.
You know, because big metric tires are from here to my house.
Yeah.
You know, whereas tracks are narrow.
Yeah.
So if we can get the same traction and be half the width,
and I think you're also seeing that it's coming together price-wise as far as tracks versus, tires,
Yeah.
you're about the same money, pretty close. If you got to replace all the tires on a 4-wheeler or put new tracks
It was one thing when you were buying 20.842s or whatever
Yeah.
for 4-wheel drive, but now you're buying giant metrics. Now those are pretty saucy.
Yeah.
So, well, I can buy tracks for the same money, so give me the track machine.
Yep.
It's narrower, it takes up less shed space,
Yep.
which is at a premium. No matter who you are, shed space is always at a premium, so just give me the track model.
Yeah. It seemed like maybe them tractors, and, we don't have one, obviously, but it sounds like there's a lot more maintenance to them. Talking to Deere there earlier this winter, and they was going out to swap tracks on it was just your big 2-track machine, but I guess they rotate them, take one off one side, and swap them.
Yeah.
So they'll wear better or whatever. And, you're always hearing guys talk about bogey wheels and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and I don't know, they sound like they're quite a bit of maintenance.
Yeah, I would say so. The bogey wheel's the big deal, and then, for the longest time, you couldn't see the oil in the bogey wheels.
Yeah.
So some company comes out with clear view caps, which is great. There again, who at the factory thought, they probably don't care how much oil is in this. They'll check those religiously. They don't want to walk by and be able to see it.
Yeah.
Let's not make it simple. Let's
Yeah.
make it more difficult. That plastic cap had to be every bit as cheap as the metal one.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you're Superman, you can't see through the metal one.
Yeah.
Just simple things like that are frustrating. That the aftermarket does a very good job of filling the void for, and it's great because the aftermarket can have an industry to work in. But sometimes you sit back and it's like, who didn't want to know how much oil was in those?
Yeah. Yep. I've always said that too. I absolutely cannot stand, hate with a passion, John Deere round bar concaves in a combine. For what we do, corn and soybeans, absolutely hate them. I mean, and that makes you wonder, whatever the companies are, Kucher, Estes, all these companies that are selling these concaves for combines and that's, just selling the shit out of them. It's like, why is Deere still doing what they're doing for combines in the Midwest? I mean, why can't that be changed? And maybe that's a dealer. Maybe that's the way our dealer orders them. Maybe you can change concaves from the factory. I have no idea, but I hate them. I absolutely hate John Deere round bar concaves. Cannot stand them.
I'm sure you probably can. Now, on the red side, if hybrids have changed so much, we take in so much more trash than we used to. So you just ran large wires, you pull every other wire for corn, you're good. Doesn't matter. Hybrids have changed. I'll give you a for instance. I was out with a neighbor. It's been, let's call it 5 years ago. Everything was going good. It was fine. Come up a little bit of a rainstorm, sprinkled just a little bit, maybe half a tenth. So we stopped for lunch, had our lunch, waited it out, ate, quit. Sun came back out. Let's go back to shelling. We only got like 4 more acres to go. Man, this thing is just a dog. Just doesn't, boy, I can't believe that picked up moisture, just with this little half a tenth of rain. Didn't think anything of it, got that field wrapped up, went to the next field, different hybrid. Shagged over like that.
Really?
Couldn't shell that next number. Couldn't shell it. Waited the next day, still couldn't shell it. When the sun was out, good to go. Had to put round bars in. Couldn't shell it otherwise. It would shag over the concaves instantly. And so I think a lot of since the hybrids are changing and we're taking in more trash and the leaves and this, that, and the other, round bars have their place. Like I said, I don't mind them on the red side. I think the aftermarket has better concaves personally.
I'm the same way. And, on Deere, you can't pull every other wire and this and that, like some different options you can do on the red ones. Or not to my knowledge, you can on a Deere. Not that I'm aware of.
I'm not a Deere expert by any means. I know on the red side of things, on a flagship, your concaves are only half concave, so you can put a round bar in this quadrant and a large wire in this one on down the line, which gives you some flexibility. I don't know. I assume you can do that on Deere, but maybe you can.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can or not. I really can't answer that. We've always just ran the round bars, and that pisses me off too when you go to some of these places and talk to people. I'm not going to throw my dealer under the bus by any means because I don't hear it from just them. It's everywhere else. You'll have a certain problem or a failure on something, and they're like, oh no, never seen that before. And it's like, you mean to tell me that I'm the first person that has ever happened to on one of these combines ever? Well, yeah, we've never. It's like, now, goddamn it, I know better than that.
They never see that. I've said that numerous times because there's lots of times I've never seen that when a customer brings something in. But it frustrates me equally when I'm on the other side of it. And the guy's like, I've never seen that. I'm like, really? You're telling me? I'm not the first guy to buy one of these. I'm well down the line. I don't buy stuff new. You're telling me in the last 10 years of production, guys running this stuff, that I'm the first guy that has tore that up in this particular fashion or had this particular issue. I find that very hard to believe, but maybe it's true. I mean, it does happen.
It does, yeah.
I see it on the, on the performance side and on the ag side both. it is frustrating though in that regard.
So what's your thoughts when Joe Blow farmer goes out, buys a new John Deere planter, case planter, whatever, and either doesn't order the John Deere meters with it or does and shit cans all that immediately and puts precision parts on it? Is that a bad design on John Deere's part, or is Precision just got something to sell so you'll buy it? What's your thoughts on, and I'm not knocking any of these companies, don't misunderstand, I'm just using this as an example.
I think the aftermarket always fills a void, right? So obviously Precision's a very successful company. So they're filling that void. Apparently there's a percentage of the people that don't want Deere's meters. They want the toolbar, they want whatever, but they're happier with the Precision meters. So, and that trickles over whether it's ag or not ag, but well, it is ag, but whether it's tractors, combines, back to the concaves, et cetera, et cetera. The aftermarket fills that voids, and you always think, well, couldn't this major manufacturer come up with that idea or, use that idea? Why did they have to have two farmers in a machine shed with a torch and a welder come up with it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered that, what John Deere bought Precision, but then ended up having to sell it off due to I don't know if it was a monopoly or what the deal was.
I think that was the legal term for it. It looked like to me they got to open the cookie jar, see what was in it.
Yeah, and take what they
wanted. What they wanted for it and see all the ideas and then push it off on to AGCO. But I mean, I always claim that that's probably one of International's biggest downfalls. It's for years they produced a tractor, right? And it was good, but M&W took it to the next level. Mm-hmm. So all your little features, I think there was 23 or 25 things you could buy for an M.
Is that right?
From M&W.
No kidding.
It was over 20. I'm certain of it. So I think the aftermarket always filled that void, and I kind of came to rely on that. And I'm not saying Deere is relying on Precision to finish off their planters, whatnot. I'm sure they'd rather sell their stuff than Precision's. But it is ironic to see these guys buy a brand new $300,000 planter, chuck that stuff in the corner of the shed, and buy somebody else's stuff to make it what they want.
Yeah. We've ran Precision units on a planter. That's been, that was 3 planters ago, I think. Yeah. And it works just as advertised. I mean, it'll stamp them out like you wouldn't believe. But after that, once planters started getting so expensive, we've just run the John Deere Pro Max discs and whatnot. And I'll be the first to admit they're not as good as Precision, but for what we're doing, it works fine. When I talk to the neighbors, it seems our yields are right in there with theirs. So, I don't know. I'm not going to say or knock Precision by any means, but once again, it comes back to the fact that at some point in time, I want to put money in my pocket. I get tired of giving it to everybody else.
Exactly. So you want maximum yield, right? But what's really important is maximum economic yield.
Yeah.
So if I can do the same job with a 50-cent part that you're doing with a $500 part, I'm better off, right?
Yeah.
So it's finding that happy medium of this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I can afford.
Yeah.
And usually those are 3 very different things.
Yeah.
If you give all the ground to one guy in the world, well, or all the ground in the United States to one farmer in the world, what machinery is he going to buy for that? Is it all going to be precisioned up? Is everything going to be on tracks? Is he going to have Estes concaves in every machine he's harvesting every acre with?
Yeah.
Maybe not, So you got to find that happy medium of this works for me. I don't really care what the neighbor's doing. This works for me and I'm going with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. There's always something to sell. It don't matter even what industry it is for that matter. I'm sure mining equipment or forestry or whatever has always got something that's a tick better than what you got. But some of that I just get tired of. And we don't farm enough to justify some of that stuff. I mean, we probably got more technology than we could justify for what we got now. I mean, we got row shutoffs on planters. I mean, all your latest GPS, auto steers, all that stuff. But for what we farm, it's probably not economical. I mean,
so there's always a battle of this industry is pushing this industry is pushing that. So, like from a seed industry, twin row is great, right?
Yeah.
Seed industry loves twin row because you're planting 40,000.
Yeah.
That's great for the seed companies. But the equipment companies are like, man, that doesn't sell us any extra corn heads. We'd rather you go to 20-inch.
Yeah.
We could sell you a 20-inch corn head. That's a whole other piece of equipment that you don't currently have. Yep. But twin row, you're doing a 30-inch head. You don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. You want to go 20. So there's always battles from this industry to that industry pushing back and forth against each other. And there again, you have to find out what works for you. 20-inch corn might work for you. On my light dirt, probably not going to be that good.
Right.
You know, and we're not that far apart.
Right.
So you got to find out what works for you and go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I thought 10 years ago this stuff would be coming to a halt. It's like, what else could they come up with? But it just, every year, it's just more. And there's been some benefit to it. I mean, I'm not going to say that there hasn't.
For sure, but like I said, a lot of that is how much it is what you actually need versus what they have to change to sell you something else that you think you need.
Right.
You know, I can probably buy a random pair of work boots tomorrow, or I can probably buy the ones I want.
Yeah.
You know, and the price point on those is drastically different, right? You know, so, and that translates into every industry. You know, do I need a leather seat in my pickup truck? No. Will my butt still be attached to the rest of my body in the morning if I drive home on a cloth seat? Yeah, probably will be.
Yep.
But do I like the leather? Yeah, it's really nice. Do I need air conditioning to blow up my crack? No, but it's super nice on a hot day. So, you know, it's all what you can afford and moving forward with that, you know?
Yeah. And we've never been the type to buy a piece of machinery solely based on the resale value. You know, a lot of guys do that. So, like me, as soon as we buy something new, the first thing I do is cut the plastic off the seat. You know, and guys just freak out about that. It's like, well, I didn't buy this seat for the next guy. I bought it for me.
Yeah.
And that is the first thing I do is cut the plastic.
And all that plastic's not comfortable.
No, it's not. And people just cringe, and it's like, you know, and I mean, it does not matter to Deere when you go to trade that combine in if it's got one little grease stain. You know, they don't even look in the cab anymore. How many hours they got on it? Make sure it ain't beat all the hell, and it is what it is. You know.
Yeah, you're exactly right on some of that. It's like, how much do you save for the next guy? Yeah, you want to take care of it.
Yeah.
But how much do you save for the next guy versus, you know, yourself sitting on a plastic? You might as well have a 560 with a seed corn sack sitting over the seat if you're just going to do that. You know.
Yeah.
It's hard to. It's hard to sit on that plastic all day.
Oh, that drives me nuts. That is the first thing I do is cut the plastic off. It just drives me up a wall.
I don't blame you there. That is frustrating. I always told me, I had a good friend of mine always told me, well, as soon as the plastics wore off the seat, I'm trading that son of a bitch off. And I always tell him, well, Case IH has better plastic than what you're buying because, you know, it's lasting longer. I can keep mine through the plastic, you know, but I don't ever set the plastic. I don't have anything new enough to have plastic on the seat, but I'm not setting it.
Yeah. But isn't it mind-boggling, though, when you go to a dealership as to what parts cost today? I mean, I will never forget it. So we run liquid fertilizer on our planter, and there's a little sensor that goes in the top of the pump. It's got a ground drive pump, you know, that runs off of the tire on your planter. And this sensor screws in the top, and that talks to my 2630 monitor in the cab to tell me how much pressure, you know, I'm putting on. And 2 years in a row, that sensor went bad. It's $400, and it looks like a spark plug. It's all. I mean, that's all the bigger it is. Nothing fancy to it. And come to find out, one of John Deere's big DTAC case deals, because the first time, because I think that we'd run the planter 2-3 years at least on the original sensor, and then it went bad, so we changed one out, $400, a little over $400. And then, so we put that one in. The very next year was bad again, right out the gate. And I always winterize it, flush everything out. I mean, I don't leave that shit sitting in there. So I know it wasn't gummed up, nothing like that. It was just, the sensors were junk. So take it to John Deere, and they had a DTAC case on it. And the way that they fixed that was where the fertilizer went into the top of that sensor, and that's where you read your pressure. Deere figured out that if you take a piece of 1/4-inch hose, and I think it had to be 11 or 12 feet long, and you just looped it all around that, and
coiled it up.
Yep, just coiled it up, and somehow that it kept it from, I don't know if it was hammering or what the deal was, and it was tearing that sensor up, and we done that and never had a bit of trouble after that. But it's weird stuff like that you figure out, but it's costly mistakes.
Yeah,
you know,
it's mind-boggling what some of that stuff costs. You know, for instance, you know, I think on the front of an 8900 series Magnum, that front nose piece is like $3,000 now.
Are you serious?
It's fiberglass. It's $3,000. Now the aftermarket sells it now, fortunately, and it's, you know, well below that. But when they were producing those tractors, and I realize it's not current production now, when they were producing those tractors, though, if they had $150 in that, I'd be shocked.
Yeah.
You know, and I realize they've had them on the shelf now, and they may have to run another batch, and it's special and all this, that, and the other. But I'm like, at some point in time, make it affordable so you can keep those tractors looking good. Otherwise, for $3,000, nobody's replacing that, right?
Yeah.
No, there's not a single person in the United States going to buy a new one of those.
No way.
You know, for $700, yeah, you'll buy one.
Yeah.
There's a company out that makes one for about that. So there's just stuff like that. that helps keep those tractors running and looking good, which benefits the company long term because those are sitting on a dealer's lot somewhere. The longer and better you make your brand look and keep going, the better off you are in the long term. And I think a lot of that gets swept under the rug. At some point in time, I wish they'd have some of your basic, we'll call them aesthetic parts or whatever. Your little plastic shields on the corners of a Magnum, et cetera, et cetera. If you make that stuff reasonably affordable to buy, a guy will buy it. You make it cost $3,000. Nobody's buying it. It looks like crap on the lot. The dealer's taking a hit on it. The farmer's taking a hit on it. And, it's never getting fixed. The more of that stuff that gets fixed and replaced, the longer those tractors are out there, which I realize isn't necessarily in their best interest. Somebody's run the numbers on there. They've got a bean counter that says, well, if we nip that off, make that too expensive to buy, eventually that thing ends up in a salvage yard and we can sell them something new. But I don't know if that's the greatest strategy. At some point, the better you can keep your product going and looking, the better off you are in the long run, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it would be like now if we look back and said, well, God, every 7200 series Magnum we've seen just beat all the hell. It's like, why the hell would you want to buy it? You want to, it makes sense. I mean,
well, why is it that you can find a 79 Ford that has a little bit of rust on it, but it's okay. It's not great, but it's not bad. But you can find a 2014 one, Chevy, Dodge, Ford, doesn't matter, whatever, and they're rusted out.
Yeah.
Now, you would think technology has come so far, paint, this, that, and the other, that they would last forever.
Yeah.
I realize that's not in their best interest. They want to make it, 3, 4, 5, 10 years at the most,
Yep.
and for that thing to end up off the road.
Yep.
But $90,000 pickup truck, I'm not really looking for it to rust out in 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little ridiculous.
Yep. And whoever come up with the brand of red paint that they painted Magnum tractors with ought to be shot. You talk about shit paint or whatever the case was. I don't know, but
you can literally wax the paint off of them. I mean, and it's. I realize red paint is hard to hold. It is, but it's so frustrating that you can find older tractors of different brands that'll buff out. Okay, and they're from the 70s, and you grab one from the 90s, and they go, well, it's white.
Yep.
There's only two kinds of Magnums, in my opinion: the kind that need painted and the kind that have been.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you put good automotive paint on it, they'll take it.
Yeah.
But they clearly didn't have that.
Or a lot of them turned pink, they just faded and looked like shit.
50 Series International, they got all those parts from different vendors, and they're 3 shades of purple.
Yeah.
And they sat inside their entire life. They were outside while they're in the field, but they never sat out a day in their life. And there are three different shades, and that is super frustrating from my end as a grower, technician, reseller, et cetera, et cetera. It just, there's no sense in it. Technology is better than that. And the paint at that time was better than that.
Yeah. Deere's always had good paint, I've thought. I mean, they've seemed to hold a shine.
They hold up. And I think green's a little more forgiving than reg pigment's hard to hold and it's expensive and whatnot. But you look at some of the other brands as well, orange, blue, purple, pink, and some of them have similar problems, and fiberglass, throws in a whole new level of, well, it won't hold or it doesn't stay as long as steel, whatever. But the better you can keep that stuff looking long term, I think the better your brand looks, and that equates to dollars at some point.
Yeah, that I would agree with. Absolutely. So, well, I think we're about ready to wrap up this episode. We've covered a lot of stuff here, from engineering failures to the positives to red combines, red tractors. I mean, we've about made a loop around the horn here. So we're going to cut it off right here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with a few more podcasts. So keep it tuned right here to the Straightforward Farming Podcast channel. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next time.